First of all, we all think we know what a human being is, right? We're not a dog, we're not a tree, we're not a rock. That just means what a human being is not. What is a human being? In the West, the Western tradition has seen the human being as defined by their brain. We have Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am, right? And the brain and the mind are seen as identical. And in the Western tradition, there has been a separation between the brain and the heart. The heart is for emotions, and the brain is for thinking. And often they see the human being as almost at war, civil war in themselves between their logical thinking and their emotional feelings. This has been not a unanimous Western notion. There's a Canadian philosopher named Charles Taylor who argued that human beings are defined instead by their interactions with others. He says we're always defined in dialogue and sometimes in struggle against our significant others who want to recognize that identity in us. Now, in the East Asian tradition, Maum is not separated into brain and heart. It is sometimes translated as heart and mind. Maum encompasses cognition, thinking, volition, wanting to do something, and emotions. So it brings together what the brain-heart distinction separates. And that's important. That makes possible a different approach to cultivating a good heart-mind, if you see them as connected rather than as separated. Now, Korea was long dominated by Neo-Confucianism in the Joseon Dynasty, which was like 1392 to 1910. And mainstream Neo-Confucianism said it's our Maum, our heart, that makes us human beings, because they believe we have an innate human nature based there. And that makes us responsible for those moral interactions with our fellow human beings that make us truly human. In Confucianism, you are not a full human being, a complete human being, until you act as a human being should act. Now, for 40 years, I've studied a guy named Tasan Chongyang, one of the most important Confucian thinkers in all Korean history. He disagreed with some mainstream Confucian assumptions. He agreed that the Maum is responsible for our cognition, our emotions, and our volition, but he argued that is not what makes us human beings. There was an ancient Chinese classic, Confucian classic called the Dashver Teak in Korean. Greater Learning is that translated in English. It says you have to first rectify your Maum before the self is cultivated. That means to Tasan, the Maum and the self, the full human being, are not the same thing. He said that Confucians before him had misread that text. So what did he think was the relationship between the Maum and the self? He said you can't separate the two, since without a well-regulated heart-mind, that's important, well-regulated heart-mind, which he defines as one free of intense self-centered emotions. If you don't do that, you will not be able to cultivate yourself so that you develop into the person you should be, a person who sees clearly how they should act and then acts accordingly in whatever situation they find themselves in. Still, nevertheless, Tasan says we have to distinguish our Maum from ourself. Our Maum is simply what directs us to engage in the interactions which make us a self. He says we also need to distinguish our Maum from our consciousness. Then, as Tasan sees it, consciousness means our ability to step back and observe the inclinations, both appropriate and inappropriate, which our Maum is providing, and then deciding to act in accordance with only those inclinations which lead to appropriate interaction. The core of Tasan's philosophy was how to become a better human being. I translated some of his writings a couple of years ago, published by University of Hawaii Press. The book is called How to Be Moral. So for Tasan, neither Maum nor consciousness constitutes the self. The self is what is created and recreated when we consciously interact appropriately. Actions, not thoughts or intentions, are what make us fully human. So rather than I think, therefore I am, it's I interact, therefore I am. How does Tasan define the self? The self, the human being, is nothing more than the sum total of a person's roles in society and the interactions they engage in. In other words, there's no self apart from what the self does. Okay? To give you a philosophical definition, the self can be defined as a self-conscious, self-aware actor who is aware of not only his or her own habitation of a specific physical body, but also that his body is embedded in a physical and social network. That physical and social network in which the self is embedded limits the possible actions he or she can take, but also opens up avenues for expanding the interactive horizons of the self. The self is a way of referring to the physical body and the mental processes occurring within it, as well as to that which is the center of its own universe of sensations and interactions, and is the active initiator of interactions with its real or imagined social and physical environment. So identity is created by interactions, and moral behavior has to be interactional. You cannot be moral when you are alone. Okay? Human beings are not separate and distinct human beings. We are human beings embedded in a social network. Okay? We cannot exist in isolation still be truly human. Okay? We are relational beings. Now, Confucians didn't deny that individual human beings exist. Okay? But the point is that we exist within a web of social network, a web of social networks, but each individual has a different set of interactions and relationships. So each individual is different, but we're different in terms of our interactions, not in terms of ourselves as being apart from our interactions. So how do we cultivate our Maum, ourself? How do we do that? Well, the Koreans use two terms, sushin, which is Sino-Korean, and momotakta. Both of these literally mean to polish and fortify our body, but it really means to cultivate our Maum so we become a better person. In other words, these terms mean to cultivate a moral character. We have to think of our bodies as more than just physical casing for our mind. Our bodies embody the potential of becoming a true self. Confucians often talk about che yong dyad. Che means literally body. Sometimes it's paired with yong is translated as substance. That's misleading. I would argue that che is potential, and yong means activation of that potential. That means our che, our body, is not our full self. Instead, our body is that through which we become a full self by interacting and reacting to the people and things around us. In other words, our body is our potential to become fully human. It is by cultivating our Maum that we can realize that potential. So, how to recultivate our Maum? Tassel has some specific advice. He wrote a lot about this. First of all, we need to be aware of emotions which stimulate us to act inappropriately, putting personal interest ahead of the common good. Okay. He mentions anger and resentment among them. He had reason to be angry. He was exiled for 18 years, forced to live away from his family. He's also, we have to watch out for feelings of fondness or pleasure. They'll stimulate us to act in an impartial manner rather than an impartial manner. But of course, he says this list of emotions is not exhaustive. Also, he says you cannot totally eliminate emotions from your Maum, your heart mind. What you need to do is cultivate appropriate emotions, such as love for your parents, love for your children, so that those emotions are stronger than your selfish emotions. You also have to exert effort to ensure that the strong self-centered emotions we still have do not distract us from interacting with people and things around us in a calm and objective manner. The most important emotional orientation we needed to cultivate, according to Hassan and other Confucians as well, is in. The Chinese character there, which is actually a combination of the character for a person and for two. So it means people together. It's often translated as benevolence, but it's more than that. It really means being fully human, treating others as the way they should be treated. If you respect the humanity in them, then they will respect the humanity in you, and you become fully human. Tassan said, in always implies a relationship between two people. Acting out of filial piety in serving a parent is yin. Showing fraternal respect for an older brother is yin. Being conscientious in serving your head of state is yin. Being trustworthy with a friend is yin. Showing compassion when you are in a high-level position is yin. Okay? These are mostly Confucian virtues, but he said they're all involved in, which is treating others as human beings, just like you want to be treated as a human being. So this is an explicit articulation of Tassan's assumption that you can only become a person of moral character, a person worthy of being called a human being, by actively engaging appropriately with your fellow human beings. Now, Tasan, of course, was not aware of Won Buddhism. He died in 1836, um, almost a century before Tasan founded Won Buddhism. But Tasan would have liked the teaching of the Four Graces, because he would have liked the idea that you cultivate a Maum by reminding yourselves of how much we owe to nature, to our parents, to our fellow beings, and to society, which provides the order, makes it possible to live productive and happy lives. That's the Four Graces of Won Buddhism. In other words, if we remind ourselves that it is the world around us which makes us what we are, then we realize that we should treat everything in that world the way it should be treated. Okay? We also have to cultivate kyung, which sometimes translated as reverence, but in more contemporary context, mindfulness. It means maintaining an attitude of respect and reverence towards something external to you, but also an internal state of mind of calmness so that you see things as they really are. So you can focus on the task at hand and see what needs to be done from the perspective of the common good rather than any personal benefit. It's assumed that if you have an attitude of kyung, if you're properly mindful, you'll perceive the world around you on its own terms and would not impose your own biases and misperceptions on it. There was an earlier neo-Confucian, also famous, called Tege, who said Confucians have to sit quietly, engage in silent sitting at the beginning of the day to cultivate mindfulness before they go out and engage in the world around them, so that they maintain a respectful attitude toward every person and every situation they find themselves in. Tasan agreed. He agreed it was important to maintain a reverent and mindful attitude toward everyone and everything in every situation in which you encountered them. Because he believes only through interacting appropriately with everyone and everything around us that we can become the human beings we are meant to be. Mm-hmm. He also emphasized empathy. Tasan shared with other Confucians the assumption that if you show every person you interact with the respect they deserve, then we will cultivate sa, it's called in Korean. Sometimes translated as empathy. It means putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, right? What you need to do is say, how would I feel if they did that to me? So that's how I'm going to treat them. Okay? It's a way of manifesting the ethical imperative to put the needs of others ahead of your own desires. And so if you want to act appropriately, you got to think from the other person's perspective. Otherwise, you'll act inappropriately in your interactions with others. And he also shared with his fellow Confucians that if you interact with your fellow human beings with respect and empathy, then you will be the Korean word is sung. Now, sung is often translated as sincere. That translation is misleading. Sung is only part. Sincerity is only part of what sung is. It means much more than being simply honest and doing what you say you will do. In its broadest sense, sung means to think and act in all interactions as a responsible member of the human community rather than as a self-centered individual. In other words, it means to act in an unselfishly cooperative and appropriately responsive manner. A person who is fully sung is free of all selfish concerns and therefore is able to always interact appropriately and therefore fully actualizes he or her humanity. They become a full, complete human being. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how do you cultivate a Maum of true humanity? How do you cultivate a Maum that is benevolent, empathetic, respectful, and selfless? Tasan was not aware of the threefold study in Won Buddhism. Again, he didn't know about Won Buddhism. He died long before it appeared on the scene. But he would agree that you need a calm and clear Maum, one free of self-centered emotions. This is where quiet sitting becomes important. You need to sit quietly for a while to quiet your mind and calm your emotions. Once you do that, you have mental clarity. With that mental clarity, you then inquire into human affairs to look closely at how you should behave in any situation you find yourselves in. This can be, mistyping there, done. This can be done while quiet sitting or by being aware of what is happening around you while you engage with your immediate environment. So you don't want to be passive all the time. You want to be calm, but also clearly perceiving what's happening around you, inquiring into human affairs. And this is what Tasan found was the most important thing. Then, third step, you must choose to act the way you know you should act. Only if you do that, if you act the way you should act, can you become the human being you are meant to be uh, a human being formed by your appropriate interactions with everyone and everything around you. Um, Tassant argued it was not easy to be moral. Zhu Xi, who synthesized Neo-Confucianism back in Song, China, 1,000 years ago, it said, if the Maum of human beings is always elusively present, there's no need to restrain and control the self. It naturally will fall in accord with proper standards and norms. Tassant said, no. He said, consistently doing the right thing and sticking to the moral path is as difficult as climbing up a steep hill. But following our preference for physical pleasure and personal benefit is as easy as rolling down that same hill. Therefore, merely knowing what to do is not enough. We have to cultivate the appropriate mental attitude to inspire us to exert the effort necessary to overcome our self-centered tendencies and act the way we know we should act. He also, by the way, he's a Confucian, so he believed that ritual was important. He wrote a lot about ritual, because in ritual, what you do in ritual, you don't think about what you want to do. You're given an assigned role in that ritual, and you play that role so that you put aside your individual wishes and do what you're supposed to do as a member of the community performing that ritual. And that teaches you how to behave as a member of society rather than as an isolated individual. So what can we learn from Tassant? Tassant assumed that if we cultivate all three functions of our Maum, its cognitive, volitional, and emotional functions, so that we overcome the selfishness, which he believed was also an inherent part of human nature, then we can be the more person we are meant to be. Okay? We can learn from him that we should always and everywhere, no matter what we are doing, keep in mind that we are part of a community that is only as part of that community that we can be the person we should be. It is only if we respect others as much as we want others to respect us, and only if we maintain an attitude of empathy toward those around us, that we can actualize our full potential and become fully human. And it is only if we become fully human that we can be appropriately responsive and unselfishly cooperative members of our community, and thereby both make that community better for us in the long run, and at the same time, make ourselves a better asset for our community. Thank you.